"Sir, are you a superhero?" the little boy whispered, and when the battle-scarred single dad just smiled, no one in that diner knew the truth. He'd already saved more lives than anyone could imagine, and he was about to save one more. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The autumn morning crept softly through the windows of the modest two-story house on Maple Street. Ethan Cole stood in the entryway, his weathered hands working carefully as he helped his son Charlie with his shoelaces. The morning sunlight caught the dust motes dancing in the air, illuminating the living room where Sarah's photograph smiled down from the mantel. Her bronze frame sat next to Ethan's military medals, which had lost their shine but none of their weight. "Loop, swoop, and pull," Charlie recited, watching his father's fingers demonstrate. "Just like you taught me, Dad." Ethan's eyes crinkled at the corners. "That's right, buddy. Soon you'll be doing this all by yourself." The house was simple but well-maintained, with toys neatly stacked in corners and Charlie's artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator. A coffee mug sat half-empty on the kitchen counter, steam still rising from its surface. The morning routine was like a carefully choreographed dance they both knew by heart. "Ready for breakfast?" Ethan asked, straightening up and grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. Charlie nodded enthusiastically, his backpack bouncing as he hopped from one foot to the other. "Can I have chocolate chip pancakes at Maggie's?" "We'll see what Miss Maggie has cooking today," Ethan replied, his hand gentle on Charlie's shoulder as they stepped out into the crisp morning air. They walked the 3 blocks to Maggie's diner, their footsteps crunching on fallen leaves. Charlie filled the quiet with questions about everything from clouds to caterpillars, while Ethan listened patiently, offering simple answers when he could. "Dad, why do leaves turn red?" "Well, they lose the green stuff that helps them make food," Ethan explained, watching his son kick through a pile of crimson maple leaves. "Like when we run out of groceries?" Ethan chuckled. "Something like that." The bell above Maggie's diner door chimed as they entered, releasing the warm scent of coffee and bacon into the morning air. The familiar sounds of clinking plates and quiet conversation welcomed them. The red vinyl booths were mostly full with the usual morning crowd. Mr. Peterson reading his newspaper, Mrs. Martinez having her morning tea, and a few construction workers huddled over steaming mugs of coffee. Maria Bennett looked up from where she was refilling coffee cups, her tired eyes brightening as she saw them. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, her blue uniform slightly wrinkled but clean. "Morning, Ethan." "Hi, Charlie," she called out, her voice warm despite the obvious fatigue in her stance. "Morning, Maria," Ethan replied quietly, nodding as he guided Charlie to their usual booth. At a nearby table, Noah Bennett sat hunched over a paper napkin, his small fingers gripping a red crayon as he drew. His face was scrunched in concentration, tongue poking out slightly as he worked on his masterpiece. Charlie immediately noticed his classmate. "Hi, Noah. What are you drawing?" Noah looked up shyly, his eyes darting briefly to his mother before he held up the napkin. "Superheroes," he said softly. On the white paper, bold red lines formed a cape-wearing figure. Maria appeared at their table with menus they didn't need, and a pot of coffee. "The usual for you two?" she asked, already pouring Ethan's coffee. "Yes, please," Ethan replied, though someone's hoping for chocolate chip pancakes today. Charlie's eyes lit up hopefully, and Maria winked at him. "I think we can manage that." "Noah, honey, let the Coles have their breakfast. You can show Charlie your drawing at school later." But Noah wasn't looking at his mother or Charlie anymore. His wide brown eyes were fixed on Ethan, studying him with that peculiar intensity only children possess. Then, in a voice clear enough to carry across the diner, he asked, "Sir, are you a superhero?" The conversation around them dimmed as several heads turned their way. Maggie, who was behind the counter, let out a warm chuckle that seemed to give others permission to join in. Even Maria covered her mouth, trying to hide her smile. Ethan felt heat rise in his cheeks. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, preferring to blend into the background of their small town. His hands wrapped around his coffee mug, seeking its warmth as he searched for words. "Noah?" Maria started, embarrassment coloring her tone. "I'm sorry, Ethan. He's been reading too many comic books lately." But Ethan just gave a small, humble smile, meeting Noah's earnest gaze. The boy's questions stirred something in him, a memory of another time when he wore a different kind of uniform, when saving lives was his daily mission. But those days felt like a lifetime ago, buried under years of quiet grief and careful routine. The moment passed as Maggie called out an order from the kitchen, and the diner's usual buzz of conversation resumed. Yet the question followed Ethan throughout the day, echoing in his mind as he dropped Charlie at school, as he worked his construction job, as he picked up groceries for dinner. That evening, technical issues. As Ethan tucked Charlie into bed, the question was still there. Charlie's room was a cozy space, filled with toy cars and picture books, the walls decorated with his artwork. Through the window, the town lights twinkled like earthbound stars. "All set, buddy?" Ethan asked, pulling the covers up to Charlie's chin. "Uh-huh," Charlie mumbled sleepily. "Dad? Yes? I think Noah was right. You're kind of like a superhero." Ethan's throat tightened as he kissed his son's forehead. He stood at the window for a moment after Charlie's eyes had closed, looking out at the peaceful town below. The street lamps cast pools of golden light on empty sidewalks, and somewhere a dog barked in the distance. "Superhero, huh?" he whispered to himself, before reaching over to turn off the lamp. The morning sun peeked through the kitchen window, casting warm squares of light across the worn linoleum floor. Ethan Cole stood at the counter, carefully wrapping Charlie's sandwich in wax paper. The radio on the windowsill played softly, the local announcer's voice, a gentle backdrop to their morning routine. And now, for local news. The radio crackled. "The downtown farmers market opens this weekend." Charlie sat at the small kitchen table, spooning cereal into his mouth while doodling on a piece of paper. His legs swung back and forth, not quite reaching the floor. "Dad?" Charlie looked up, milk dripping from his spoon. "Can I have apple slices too?" Ethan nodded, already reaching for the fruit bowl. "Sure, buddy." He grabbed an apple and started cutting it into neat crescents, just the way Charlie liked them. The kitchen told their story in small details. A few dishes in the sink, Charlie's artwork stuck to the fridge with magnets, and a calendar marked with doctor's appointments and school events. Simple, structured, safe. After dropping Charlie at school, Ethan drove his old pickup truck to the construction site on the edge of town. The morning air was crisp, and the site buzzed with activity. Workers in hard hats moved purposefully, carrying tools and materials. Ethan grabbed his tool belt from the truck and pulled on his own hard hat. He preferred working with his hands. It kept his mind focused, present. The physical labor helped quiet the memories that sometimes tried to surface. "Morning, Cole," several workers called out as he passed. Ethan responded with short nods, friendly but reserved. He'd been working here for 3 years now, and his colleagues had learned to respect his quiet nature. The morning progressed steadily as they worked on framing the second floor of what would become a new community center. Ethan moved methodically, measuring twice, cutting once, each nail driven with precision. Around mid-morning, he noticed Joe Miller struggling with a heavy beam. The older man's face was red with exertion, his weathered hands trembling slightly under the weight. Without hesitation, Ethan crossed the site. "Let me help with that, Joe." "Ah, hell," Joe huffed, his breath short, getting too old for this heavy lifting. Together, they positioned the beam. Joe wiped his forehead with a bandana, giving Ethan a grateful look. "Thanks, son. These old bones ain't what they used to be." Ethan shrugged, already turning back to his work, but Joe wasn't finished. "You know," the older man continued, "you remind me of my boy, always ready to help, never wanting credit." He paused. "He's over in Afghanistan now." Ethan's shoulders tensed slightly, but he managed a small nod. "He'll be okay," he said quietly, the words carrying more weight than their simplicity suggested. The day continued, sun climbing higher, the sound of hammers and saws filling the air. During his lunch break, Ethan sat alone in his truck, eating a simple sandwich and reading a worn paperback novel. Later that afternoon, driving home along Main Street, Ethan spotted an old Buick pulled over on the shoulder, hazard lights blinking weakly. An elderly man in a veteran's baseball cap stood beside it, looking lost. Ethan recognized him from the VA Center, Mr. Douglas, who always sat quietly in the corner during support group meetings. Without thinking twice, Ethan pulled over. Having trouble? He asked, approaching the stranded vehicle. Mr. Douglas's face brightened with relief. Car just died on me. Was heading home from the pharmacy. He gestured helplessly at the engine. Don't know what's wrong. Ethan popped the hood. The familiar smell of oil and metal bringing back memories of working on vehicles in the Army. After a quick inspection, he identified the problem. A loose battery connection. Should be an easy fix, he said, reaching for the tools he kept in his truck. As he worked, he noticed Mr. Douglas watching him with grateful eyes. You're that coal boy, aren't you? The older veteran asked. See you sometimes at the center. Ethan nodded, tightening the last connection. Try it now, he called out. The engine turned over smoothly. Mister? Douglas's face lit up with a relieved smile. Thank you, son. Don't know what I would have done. Anyone would have helped, Ethan said quietly, wiping his hands on a rag. What neither of them noticed was Noah Bennett, walking home from school with his mother Maria. The little boy stopped on the opposite sidewalk, watching wide-eyed as Ethan helped the elderly veteran. That evening, after a simple dinner of spaghetti and meatballs, Charlie worked on his homework at the kitchen table while Ethan washed dishes. The phone rang, breaking the comfortable silence. Hello? Ethan dried his hands on a dish towel as he answered. Ethan? This is Tom from the VA Center. The voice was friendly, familiar. We've got a community project coming up. Some of our older vets need help with home repairs, basic stuff like fixing porches, installing grab bars. Could use someone with your construction experience. Ethan was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at the darkening sky. Charlie glanced up from his homework, curious about the call. When? Ethan finally asked. Starting next weekend. What do you say? Ethan watched his son return to his math problems, pencil moving carefully across the paper. Maybe it was time to do more than just attend the occasional support group. Maybe it was time to reach out. Yeah, he said softly. I can help. Great. I'll email you the details. After hanging up, Ethan returned to the dishes, the familiar routine of soap and water soothing his thoughts. Charlie's voice broke through his reflection. Was that about helping people, Dad? Yeah, buddy. Some folks need help fixing things around their houses. Charlie nodded seriously. That's good. Helping people is good. Ethan smiled slightly, reminded again of how much wisdom could come from a child's simple perspective. Yeah, he agreed, it is. The drizzle fell softly over Brook Ridge, coating the sleepy town in a gentle gray mist that made everything look like a watercolor painting left out in the rain. Puddles had formed along Main Street overnight, their surfaces reflecting the warm neon glow of Maggie's Diner sign like scattered coins. The autumn air carried that clean, earthy scent that only comes after a good rain, mixing with the faint aroma of bacon and fresh coffee drifting from the diner's kitchen vents. Ethan and Charlie pushed through the glass door, bringing with them the crisp scent of rain and morning. The familiar bell jingled above their heads, a cheerful sound that somehow made the patter of droplets on the windows seem more like music than weather. Charlie's yellow raincoat dripped tiny rivers onto the checkered linoleum floor, and his breath still puffed white in the lingering chill of the October morning. Morning, you two. Maggie called from behind the counter, her red hair pulled back in its usual messy bun, wisps escaping to frame her freckled face. She was already reaching for Ethan's regular coffee mug, the blue ceramic one with the chip on the handle that she'd claimed as his months ago before they'd even settled into their usual booth by the window. Her movements were quick and practiced, the dance of someone who'd been serving the same customers, the same drinks for years. Charlie shook the raindrops from his bright yellow raincoat with the enthusiasm only a 6-year-old could muster, sending tiny droplets flying in all directions. His cheeks were pink from the morning chill, and his dark hair stuck up at odd angles where his pink hood had been. Can I have hot chocolate, Miss Maggie, with extra marshmallows? The little ones and the big ones? You sure can, sweetie. Maggie winked at him, her whole face crinkling with genuine affection. She'd been watching this boy grow up, one hot chocolate at a time. Maria, hun, can you get Charlie his special hot chocolate? You know how he likes it. Maria appeared from the kitchen like a gentle breeze, her soft smile brightening the entire corner of the diner when she saw them. She tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, with fingers that showed the small calluses of honest work, balancing a coffee pot in her other hand, with the easy grace of someone who'd learned to carry the world without dropping anything important. Her uniform was crisp, despite the early hour, and there was something about the way she moved, careful but determined, that spoke of quiet strength. "Good morning, you two." Her voice carried the warmth of someone genuinely happy to see familiar faces. "And thank you again, Ethan, for fixing that kitchen sink last week. I honestly don't know how you even knew it was broken, but it's not making that awful dripping sound anymore. I was starting to go crazy listening to it all night." Ethan shifted in his seat, the worn vinyl squeaking slightly under his weight. His shoulders tensed with the familiar discomfort that came whenever anyone thanked him for anything. He pulled his baseball cap lower over his eyes. It was nothing, really. Just a loose washer and some old plumbing. Took maybe 10 minutes. "Daddy fixes everything," Charlie declared proudly, spreading his favorite dinosaur coloring book across the table with the reverence other children reserved for treasure maps. The book was well worn, its corners soft from countless adventures, and several pages had been carefully taped back together. He's really, really good at it. Yesterday he fixed Mrs. Patterson's fence, and last month he helped Mr. Jenkins with his porch steps. The diner held the peaceful quiet of early morning, just a handful of regulars scattered across the red vinyl booths. Old Mr. Henderson sat in his usual corner spot, reading yesterday's newspaper through wire-rimmed glasses that had seen better decades. Two construction workers from the highway project nursed their coffee at the counter, their hard hats resting beside steaming mugs that had "World's Best Coffee" printed in faded letters. Noah sat at the far end of the counter, his thin legs swinging rhythmically as he worked intently on something with a small box of crayons. The boy was all sharp angles and serious concentration, his tongue poking out slightly as he focused on his artwork. When he spotted Ethan settling into the booth, his entire face transformed, eyes lighting up like someone had just plugged in a Christmas tree. "Mom, can I show him? Please?" Noah slid off his stool with the careful precision of a child who'd learned not to make unnecessary noise. He clutched a piece of paper to his chest like it contained state secrets, his sneakers making soft squeaking sounds against the linoleum as he approached their table. Maria glanced over from where she was wiping down the counter, and something tender passed across her features. She nodded, and Noah practically bounced with excitement, rushing over to their booth and nearly tripping over his own feet in his eagerness. He tugged on Ethan's flannel sleeve with small paint-stained fingers, his face earnest and hopeful in the way only children could manage. "I made this for you, Mr. Ethan. I worked on it all morning before we opened, and yesterday after school too." Ethan took the offered drawing with hands that were steady despite the unexpected tightness in his chest. The paper was standard copy paper, the kind they gave kids at school, but it had been transformed into something magical. There he was, rendered in bold crayon strokes, wearing a flowing red cape that rippled behind him like fabric caught in a superhero wind. The figure was helping various stick people scattered across the page, pushing a car with a flat tire, fixing a sagging roof, carrying armloads of groceries for someone with a walking cane. In one corner, he was even helping a stick figure cat down from a tree. Above it all, written in the wobbly letters of a 6-year-old who was still learning to control a crayon, "Super Ethan." "See?" Noah pointed eagerly with a finger that still had traces of purple crayon under the nail. "That's you helping Mr. Douglas with his car last week when it wouldn't start in the rain. And there you are fixing Mrs. Chen's roof after that big storm. Mom says you help people all the time, just like a real superhero. She says superheroes don't always wear capes, but I thought you should have one anyway because capes are cool." A laugh escaped Ethan, rough and awkward but genuine, like a rusty gate finally swinging open. This is really something special, Noah. Thank you." His voice came out gruffer than he intended, thick with emotion he couldn't quite hide or fully understand. Charlie leaned across the table with the curiosity of someone discovering buried treasure, his hot chocolate temporarily forgotten. "Wow, Dad, you really do look just like Superman. Can we put it on our fridge when we get home? right next to my drawing of the dinosaur family?" Maria approached their table carrying Charlie's hot chocolate, a masterpiece topped with a mountain of marshmallows that defied the laws of physics, and Ethan's coffee in his familiar chipped mug. She moved with the quiet efficiency of someone who'd learned to read a room, to know when conversation was welcome and when space was needed. She glanced at the drawing spread across the table and smiled softly, the kind of smile that held years of watching her son search for heroes in a world that had shown him precious few. "Noah's been working on that drawing for days," she said, setting down the drinks with careful precision. "He was so excited to give it to you. He kept asking when you'd come in again." The two boys settled into their own conversation with the easy intimacy of instant friendship. Noah slid into the booth next to Charlie, and they bent their heads together over the dinosaur coloring book, deciding with serious deliberation which colors would be most appropriate for a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Their voices mixed together in the musical chatter of childhood, punctuated by giggles and the scratch of crayons against paper. Maria lingered at their table, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her apron, a nervous habit Ethan had begun to notice. There was something she wanted to say, something that made her shoulders tense slightly despite her gentle smile. "I hope it's not too much," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "The drawing, I mean. Noah, he doesn't have many male role models in his life. His father, Ray." She paused, and something dark flickered across her face, like a cloud passing over the Sunday. Her hands stilled on her apron, and for just a moment she looked much older than her 29 years. "Well, he's not in the picture anymore. Hasn't been for a while now. It's been just us, trying to make it work, trying to build something good." Ethan nodded, understanding passing between them without need for words. He recognized the look in her eyes, the careful way she held herself, the instinctive wariness that came from learning the hard way that not all storms passed without leaving damage. He didn't press for details, didn't ask the questions that crowded behind his teeth. Instead, he offered something simpler, something safer. "I noticed the shelf behind the counter is starting to sag on one side. Could be dangerous if it gave way with all those plates and mugs. I could take a look at it, if you'd like." "Wouldn't take long." Relief washed over Maria's features like sunrise after a long night. "You don't have to do that. You've already done so much. I know I don't have to." Ethan's voice was steady, certain, "but I'd like to help." "It's what neighbors do." Maggie's voice carried from the kitchen, cutting through the gentle morning atmosphere. "Maria, hun, order up. Table 6 is getting hungry, and you know how cranky Mr. Peterson gets when his eggs get cold. I should get back to work." Maria smiled apologetically, but there was something lighter in her expression now, something that hadn't been there when she'd first approached their table. "But thank you, really, for everything you do, for being the kind of person Noah can look up to." The morning continued its gentle rhythm, settling into the comfortable pace of a small town beginning another day. The rain continued its soft percussion against the windows, and the mingled smells of coffee, maple syrup, and bacon filled the air with the promise of comfort. Steam rose from coffee cups, and the diner hummed with the quiet conversations of people who knew each other's stories, who'd weathered storms together and celebrated small victories over shared meals. Charlie and Noah had their heads bent together over the coloring book like young scholars studying ancient texts. They giggled as they debated the proper color for their T-Rex Charlie, insisting that green was most realistic, while Noah argued passionately for purple, because dinosaurs should be more exciting. Their friendship was blooming with the pure joy that only children could achieve, unmarked by the complications that burdened adult relationships. When it was time to leave for school, Ethan helped Charlie back into his bright yellow raincoat, checking twice to make sure the zipper was pulled up tight against the continuing drizzle. He carefully folded Noah's drawing and tucked it into his jacket pocket, safe from the rain and close to his heart. The boy beamed at him from his perch back at the counter, waving goodbye with a paint-stained hand and calling out, "See you soon, Super." "Ethan." Outside, Ethan opened their shared umbrella navy blue with a small tear near one edge that he kept meaning to fix, and Charlie huddled. The morning sunlight crept through the window blinds. casting thin stripes across Ethan's living room floor. He stood motionless, holding the carefully folded American flag in his calloused hands. The triangle of blue and white stars felt heavier than it should, weighted down by memories of the day his world changed forever. 5 years. Sometimes it felt like yesterday, sometimes like a lifetime ago. The flag had arrived with a letter, formal words that couldn't capture who Sarah really was. Her infectious laugh, the way she'd dance with Charlie in the kitchen, how she could lift everyone's spirits even on the hardest days in their unit. Charlie's footsteps padded down the hallway, but Ethan didn't move. His son appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his eyes, his dinosaur pajamas wrinkled from sleep. "Daddy, are you looking at Mommy's flag again?" Ethan cleared his throat. "Yeah, buddy. Just remembering." Charlie walked over and wrapped his small arms around Ethan's leg. "I remember her too. She used to make funny faces at breakfast." Ethan's chest tightened. He carefully placed the flag back in its display case and lifted Charlie into his arms. "She sure did. And you know what? You make the exact same faces sometimes." The morning drifted by slowly. While Charlie watched cartoons, Ethan's mind wandered back to that final deployment. He and Sarah had served in the same forward operating base, him as a combat medic, her in logistics. They'd promised each other they'd come home together. He remembered their last conversation, her quick kiss before heading out on what should have been a routine supply run, the explosion, the chaos, his desperate attempts to reach her position. The memories came in fragments now, like shattered glass catching sunlight. Some days were better than others, but the guilt never really went away. He should have been there, should have saved her, should have. His phone buzzed, reminding him of his appointment at the VA center. "Come on, Charlie. Time to see Miss Rosa while I talk to Dr. Hampton." The VA center was quiet on Saturday mornings. Charlie happily joined the child care group while Ethan made his way to Dr. Hampton's office. She greeted him with her usual warm smile, crow's feet crinkling at the corners of her eyes. "You're carrying it heavy today, Ethan," she said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. "I can see it in your shoulders." Ethan sat down, his posture military straight despite years of civilian life. "Found myself holding Sarah's flag this morning, Doctor." Hampton nodded. "And how did that feel?" "Like always. Like I failed her." The words came out rough, sandpaper harsh. "You know that's not true, Doctor," Hampton said gently. She'd heard this before, had helped countless veterans through similar battles. "Sarah was doing her duty, just like you were. The guilt you're carrying, it's not yours to bear." Ethan stared at his hands. Charlie asked about her today. He's starting to forget the little things. Her voice, the way she moved. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm failing him too. By protecting yourself from pain, you might be protecting him from knowing his mother, Doctor." Hampton suggested carefully. "When was the last time you shared stories about Sarah with the community? Let others help carry her memory?" "I don't. It's easier to keep it locked away." Dr. Hampton leaned forward. "Sometimes healing comes when you stop trying to be the hero and just be human." She watched his reaction. "You don't have to carry this alone, Ethan. The community here, they understand. They want to help." Ethan nodded, still unsure how to bridge that gap between isolation and connection. The session continued, touching on his recent interactions at the diner. His volunteer work. Dr. Hampton smiled when he mentioned Maria and Noah. "It sounds like you're already taking small steps," she observed. "Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let others see our humanity." After the session, Ethan collected Charlie, his mind still turning over Dr. Hampton's words. As they walked to their truck, Mrs. Peterson from next door called out to them. "Ethan, don't forget about the neighborhood barbecue tonight. Everyone's coming, even that sweet waitress from Maggie's and her little boy." Charlie's face lit up. "Can we go, Daddy? Please?" "Noah will be there." Ethan hesitated, then remembered Dr. Hampton's advice. "Sure, buddy. We can go for a little while." The evening arrived warm and golden, the kind of early summer night that seemed to stretch endlessly. The Petersons' backyard buzzed with conversation and laughter. Children darted between adults, paper plates of hot dogs in hand. Charlie spotted Noah immediately and the two boys raced off to join the other kids chasing fireflies. Their delighted squeals carried across the yard as they cupped their hands around the glowing insects. "They're becoming quite the duo," a soft voice said beside him. Maria stood there holding 2 glasses of lemonade, offering one to him with a gentle smile. "Thanks," Ethan said, accepting the drink. In the fading daylight, he noticed how her eyes caught the warm glow of the string lights hung overhead. They stood in comfortable silence, watching their sons play. Noah's laughter rang out as Charlie showed him how to carefully catch a firefly without hurting it. "Charlie's good with him," Maria said. "Noah's been talking about him non-stop since they met at the diner." Ethan felt something warm unfurl in his chest, different from the usual weight of grief. Noah's drawing meant a lot to Charlie, too. He hung it up in his room. Maria's smile widened. "The superhero one? Noah keeps making more. He has quite the collection going." Their conversation flowed easily, punctuated by shared glances and quiet laughter as they watched their boys play. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt the walls he'd built around his heart begin to soften, just a little. The fireflies danced around them, their light a reminder that even in darkness, there was always a spark of hope waiting to be found. The morning sun cast long shadows across the construction site as Ethan Cole pulled his weathered pickup truck into his usual parking spot. He grabbed his hard hat from the passenger seat, already thinking about the day's work ahead, but something felt different today. His co-workers were huddled near the site office, and as he approached, they quickly dispersed, all except Joe, who held up a copy of the Brookridge Daily News with a knowing grin. "Well, well, if it isn't our local celebrity," Joe called out, waving the paper. Ethan's stomach dropped when he saw his own image on the front page. There he was, helping Mr. Douglas with his broken-down car in the pouring rain last week. The headline jumped out at him. "Local veteran saves stranded driver." "I didn't do anything special," Ethan mumbled, adjusting his tool belt. Mike, one of the younger workers, joined them. "My grandmother can't stop talking about you, Cole. Says you're what this town needs, a real hero." "It was just a flat tire," Ethan protested, his cheeks flushing. He wasn't used to this kind of attention. For years, he'd worked hard to blend into the background, to keep his head down and focus on Charlie. Throughout the morning, more co-workers approached with good-natured ribbing and sincere praise. During their lunch break, Joe sat next to Ethan on a stack of lumber. "You know, Cole," Joe said between bites of his sandwich, "sometimes the smallest acts of kindness make the biggest difference. People notice that stuff." Ethan nodded, uncomfortable with the spotlight but touched by the warmth in his co-worker's eyes. It had been so long since he'd felt truly connected to the community. After work, Ethan stopped by Maggie's Diner to pick up Charlie. His son had started spending afternoons there, playing with Noah while Maria worked her shift. As he pushed open the door, the familiar bell chimed, and several customers turned to smile at him. "There he is." Mrs. Peterson, a regular at the diner, called out, "Our hometown hero." Maria appeared from behind the counter, her eyes twinkling. "Noah's been telling everyone who listened that Mr. Ethan is a real superhero," she said softly. "He carried that newspaper around all day." Charlie ran up to Ethan, wrapping his arms around his father's waist. "Dad, everyone at school saw your picture. They think you're so cool." Ethan ruffled his son's hair, his throat tight with emotion. "Just trying to help out where I can, buddy." Noah appeared beside Charlie, clutching another crayon drawing. This one showed Ethan in a cape, helping Mr. Douglas with his car. The rain was drawn as blue squiggles, but the smile on cartoon Ethan's face was unmistakable. "You're like the superheroes in my books," Noah said shyly, handing him the picture. "You help people." Maria watched the exchange with gentle eyes. "He's right, you know. This town needs more people like you, Ethan." Charlie looked up at his father, his small face serious. "Maybe Mom sent us this new friend," he said quietly. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. His chest tightened, and for a moment, he couldn't speak. Sarah's absence had left such a huge hole in their lives. But here, in this warm diner with these kind people, something felt different. Not whole exactly, but possible. Later that evening, after dropping Charlie at home with their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Martinez, watching him, Ethan drove to Maria's small house on Oak Street. The back porch steps had been worrying him since he'd noticed their deteriorating condition last week. The night was quiet, crickets chirping in the darkness. Ethan worked by the light of his portable work lamp, carefully replacing the rotting boards. Familiar rhythm of hammer and nail soothed him, helped him process the day's events. From her kitchen window, Maria watched him work. She stood at the sink, drying dishes and observing his steady movements. Noah was asleep upstairs, his superhero drawing spread across his bedroom floor. "Thank you," she whispered, though she knew he couldn't hear her through the glass. Ethan continued working, unaware of her gratitude but feeling, for the first time in years, like he might be exactly where he needed to be. The night air was cool on his face, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The simple act of fixing these steps felt like more than just repair work. It felt like building something new. The tools in his hands were familiar, the wood grain rough against his palms. Each nail he drove home seemed to anchor him more firmly to this moment, to this town, to these people who had somehow begun to feel like more than just neighbors. As he worked, Sarah's memory felt closer, gentler than it had in years, as if she were smiling down on him, approving of these small acts of kindness that were slowly bringing him back to life. The church bells of First Baptist rang through the crisp morning air, their melody echoing across Brookridge's quiet streets. Ethan adjusted Charlie's little clip-on tie, smoothing down the boy's cowlick one last time before they climbed the worn stone steps. "Dad, look! It's Noah and Miss Maria!" Charlie pointed excitedly. Maria stood at the top of the steps in a simple blue dress, Noah fidgeting beside her in his Sunday best. Her face lit up when she saw them approaching. "Good morning. I wasn't sure if you'd make it." "We wouldn't miss it," Ethan replied softly, his usual reserve melting at the sight of her warm smile. Inside, sunlight streamed through stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the wooden pews. The four of them sat together, Charlie and Noah, whispering and sharing hymn books while the organ played. Ethan couldn't help but notice how natural it felt, like puzzle pieces fitting together. During the sermon about community and fellowship, Maria's hand accidentally brushed against Ethan's as they both reached for the Bible in the pew rack. They exchanged shy glances, quickly looking away. After the service, elderly Mrs. Peterson approached them. "Well, isn't this just lovely to see? You all make such a beautiful family." Her innocent comment brought a blush to Maria's cheeks and made Ethan clear his throat awkwardly. "The weather's perfect for a picnic," Maria suggested as they left the church. "I packed some extra sandwiches, just in case." "Can we, Dad? Please?" Charlie bounced on his toes. Ethan found himself nodding. "That sounds nice." They drove separately to Lake Morrison, meeting at the old picnic area where massive oak trees provided dappled shade. Maria spread out a red checkered blanket while the boys explored nearby, collecting interesting rocks and leaves. "Charlie, Noah, lunch is ready," Maria called, laying out ham sandwiches, fresh fruit, and homemade cookies. The boys came running, their dress shoes already dusty from adventure. They sat cross-legged on the blanket, talking with their mouths full about the tadpoles they'd spotted in the shallow water. "Slow down, buddy." Ethan chuckled as Charlie tried to stuff an entire cookie in his mouth. The food's not going anywhere. Maria watched them with gentle eyes. "This is nice," she said softly. "Normal. I'd almost forgotten what normal feels like." Ethan understood completely. Since losing Sarah, ordinary moments like these had seemed impossible. Yet here they were, sharing sandwiches and watching their sons play together, healing in ways they hadn't expected. After lunch, the boys convinced Ethan to help them build a fort from fallen branches, while Maria packed up the remains of their picnic. The sound of their laughter carried across the lake, drawing smiles from other families nearby. "Dad, watch. This," Charlie called, attempting to skip a stone across the water's surface. It plopped straight down instead, but Noah clapped anyway. "You'll get it next time," Ethan encouraged. "Here, let me show you both the trick." He demonstrated the proper technique, his stone bouncing 4 times before sinking. "Wow." Noah's eyes widened. You really can do everything. The afternoon passed in a golden haze of simple pleasures. As the sun began to set, they reluctantly packed up to head home. Thank you, Maria said as they walked to their cars. This meant a lot to Noah, to both of us. None of them noticed the dark figure watching from a pickup truck across the parking lot, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Later that evening, Maria stepped onto her front porch to bring in the welcome mat before bed. A folded piece of paper fluttered to the ground. Her hands trembled as she opened it, reading the roughly scrawled message, "He's my boy, and I'm coming back for him." The world tilted sideways. Ray. He was back. Terror seized her chest as memories flooded back, the shouting, the bruises, the fear. Her fingers fumbled with her phone as she dialed Ethan's number. Maria? His voice was alert despite the late hour. What's wrong? Ray, she choked out. He's here. He left a note. Ethan, I'm scared. Lock your doors. I'm on my way. 15 minutes later, Ethan's truck pulled into her driveway. He must have called Mrs. Jenkins next door to watch Charlie, because he was alone. Maria opened the door with shaking hands, showing him the threatening note. Ethan's jaw tightened as he read it. You're not alone anymore. He promised, his voice steady and sure. The words wrapped around her like a protective shield. He insisted on checking all the windows and doors, making sure everything was secure. Noah slept peacefully upstairs, unaware of the storm gathering around him. I'll stay out front tonight, Ethan said, his military training evident in his stance. Try to get some rest. Maria wanted to argue, to tell him it wasn't necessary, but the comfort of his presence overwhelmed her pride. Thank you, she whispered. The porch light cast long shadows across the front yard as Ethan took up his post. His face was set with quiet determination. A silent guardian against the darkness that threatened this fragile peace they'd found. The morning sun hadn't yet risen when Ethan stepped into his kitchen, the hardwood floors creaking beneath his bare feet. He pulled eggs and milk from the fridge, but his movements were mechanical, his mind elsewhere. The threatening note Maria had found kept replaying in his thoughts. Charlie shuffled into the kitchen, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His Spider-Man pajamas were wrinkled, and his brown hair stuck up at odd angles. Morning, buddy, Ethan said, forcing a smile. How about some French toast? Yes, please. Charlie climbed onto his usual chair at the kitchen counter. Can we put extra cinnamon on it? Ethan nodded, dipping bread into the egg mixture. The sizzle of butter in the pan filled the quiet kitchen. As he cooked, he kept glancing at his phone, checking for messages from Maria. Dad? Charlie's voice pulled him back to the present. You look worried. Is something wrong? Ethan placed a plate of French toast in front of his son. Just thinking about our friends, bud. Remember how I told you sometimes people need help, even if they don't ask for it? Charlie nodded, drowning his breakfast in maple syrup. Like Miss Maria and Noah? Yeah, exactly like them. Ethan's chest tightened. He checked his watch, still early enough to drive by Maria's house before work. After dropping Charlie at his friend's house for their usual carpool to school, Ethan steered his truck toward Maria's neighborhood. The streets were quiet, most people still getting ready for work. He slowed as he approached her modest white house with its recently repaired porch steps. Maria was outside, hurrying Noah toward her old blue Honda. She jumped when Ethan's truck pulled up, then visibly relaxed when she recognized him. Morning, he called softly, stepping out. Just wanted to check on you both. Noah waved excitedly. But Maria's smile didn't reach her eyes. Dark circles beneath them suggested she hadn't slept much. We're fine, she insisted, but her hands trembled as she helped Noah with his backpack. Really, Ethan, you don't need to worry. Maria. His voice was gentle but firm. That note wasn't nothing. She glanced around nervously, then whispered, I can handle Ray. I've done it before. You shouldn't have to. Ethan pulled out his phone. I'm calling Daniel Brooks. He's an old friend. Works for the police department now. He should know about this. Maria started to protest, but Noah tugged at her sleeve. Mommy, we'll be late for school. Go on, Ethan said. I'll update you later. As Maria's car disappeared around the corner, Ethan dialed Daniel's number. From the corner of his eye, he caught movement in the shadows between houses, but when he turned to look, nothing was there. "Brooks here," came the familiar voice. "Daniel, it's Ethan Cole. Got a minute?" "For you? Always. What's up?" Ethan explained the situation. Maria's abusive ex-husband, the threatening note, his concerns about Noah's safety. His military training kicked in as he reported the details efficiently. "Ray Dawson," Daniel said thoughtfully. "Yeah, I remember his case. Did time for domestic violence. He wasn't supposed to contact them at all. That note's already a violation of his parole. So, you can do something? I'll increase patrols in the area and look into his current whereabouts. But Ethan," Daniel paused, "be careful. Guys like that when they feel cornered." "I know." Ethan remembered similar situations overseas. Desperate men making desperate choices. "Thanks, Daniel." After hanging up, Ethan did one more drive around the block. In the growing morning light, he spotted a figure ducking behind a fence, a man in a dark jacket. His heart rate quickened, combat instincts surging, but before he could stop his truck, the figure vanished. The rest of Ethan's workday passed in a blur of construction noise and worry. He checked his phone often, relieved to see regular texts from Maria confirming she and Noah were okay. Daniel sent updates about increased police presence in the area. That evening, as Ethan tucked Charlie into bed, his son asked, "Dad, are you going to help Miss Maria and Noah like you helped Mom's friends in the Army?" Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, surprised. "What do you mean, bud?" "Mom used to say you were brave because you protected people who needed help." Charlie hugged his stuffed dinosaur closer. "Noah told me his dad isn't nice like you." He's scared. Ethan's throat tightened. He smoothed Charlie's hair, buying time to find the right words. "You know what, Charlie? There are different kinds of courage. Sometimes it's loud and obvious, like firefighters rushing into burning buildings. But sometimes," he thought of Maria's quiet strength, her determination to protect Noah. "Sometimes the bravest thing is just standing between danger and what's right, even when you're scared." Like a shield. Charlie's eyes were serious in the soft glow of his nightlight, exactly like a shield. Ethan pulled the covers up to Charlie's chin. "And that's the kind of courage I want to teach you about. The quiet kind that helps others feel safe." Charlie yawned, snuggling deeper into his pillow. "I think you're already teaching me, Dad." Ethan kissed his son's forehead, then stood watching him drift off to sleep. Through the bedroom window, he could see the peaceful street below, knowing somewhere out there, Ray was watching and waiting. But this time, unlike in war, Ethan had a chance to stop the threat before it struck. He wouldn't fail, not Maria, not Noah, and not his own son, who was learning what real courage looked like. The morning sun painted long shadows across the quiet suburban street as Ethan's pickup truck rumbled down the road. In the back seat, Charlie and Noah sat shoulder to shoulder, their excited chatter filling the cab with warmth. Spread across their laps were dozens of colorful superhero trading cards. "Look at this one." Charlie held up a card showing a caped figure. "He can fly and shoot lasers from his eyes." Noah's eyes widened. "That's so cool. But check this out." He carefully pulled a worn card from his collection. "This hero doesn't have any powers. He just helps people because it's right." Ethan caught Noah's words in the rearview mirror, and something tugged at his heart. Through the mirror, he watched the two boys, Charlie with his mother's gentle smile and Noah with his quiet wisdom. Trading cards and dreams of heroes. At a red light, Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from Maria. "Meeting with the lawyer at 10. Thank you for coming with me." The community center was busy when they arrived later that morning. Maria sat in a worn chair, hands clasped tightly in her lap, as the pro bono lawyer spread papers across his desk. Ethan stood near the window, arms crossed, listening intently. "These police reports," the lawyer said, holding up a thick folder, "they show a clear pattern of abuse. The restraining order violations, the hospital visits." He paused, glancing at Maria's downcast eyes. Maria's voice trembled. "I just want to keep my son safe." She looked up at Ethan, guilt clouding her features. "I'm so sorry to drag you into this mess. You and Charlie have your own lives, your own struggles." Ethan moved from the window, pulling up a chair beside her. His voice was soft but firm. "Maria, look at me." She raised her eyes to meet his steady gaze. "I fought for strangers overseas. I'll fight for you here." The words triggered memories he usually kept locked away. Suddenly, he was back there. The hot desert air, the sound of helicopters, the fear in civilians' eyes as they huddled in bombed-out buildings. He remembered kneeling beside a young mother and her child, offering his canteen, speaking gentle words in broken Arabic. "You're safe now," he had told them, though his hands shook from recent firefights. The lawyer's voice pulled him back to the present. "Mr. Cole, your testimony about Ray's recent threatening behavior could really help our case." Ethan nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Whatever you need." They spent the next few hours building Maria's case. Police reports, witness statements, medical records that made Ethan's blood run cold. Through it all, Maria sat straight-backed, her quiet strength showing through despite her fear. By late afternoon, they had a solid foundation for the custody hearing. The lawyer seemed confident, but Maria's hands still trembled as she gathered her purse to leave. "One day at a time," Ethan reminded her, walking her to her car. "You're not alone anymore." That evening, after making dinner for Charlie, simple spaghetti with extra meatballs, just the way he liked it, Ethan sat at his kitchen table reviewing copies of the case files. Charlie was in the living room, carefully organizing his and Noah's combined superhero card collection for tomorrow. The phone rang, breaking the peaceful silence. Unknown number. "Hello? Stay out of this, soldier." Ray's voice was cold, taunting, a snake's hiss through the receiver. Ethan's whole body tensed, combat instincts flaring to life. He said nothing, letting the silence stretch between them. "Did you hear me, hero?" Ray spat the word like poison. "This isn't your fight." Ethan's jaw tightened. He looked at the police report spread across his table, at Charlie happily playing in the next room, at the photo of Sarah on the wall, her brave smile forever frozen in time. Without a word, he hung up the phone, his expression set in stone. The handset felt heavy in his grip as he stared at it. The evening quiet, broken only by Charlie's happy humming from the other room and the steady ticking of the kitchen clock. The rain drummed steadily against the church's stained glass windows, casting colorful shadows across the wooden pews. Ethan Cole stood in the entrance of the small community church, shaking water from his jacket while holding an umbrella over Maria and their boys. Charlie and Noah darted inside, their sneakers squeaking on the polished floor as they raced to the front row. Pastor Samuel Green emerged from his office, his weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "Ethan, Maria, thank you for coming." He clasped their hands in greeting, his eyes kind behind wire-rimmed glasses. The community's been asking how they can help. Maria clutched her purse tightly, her voice soft. "Pastor, I don't know how to thank you for organizing this." "No thanks needed, child." The pastor gestured toward the fellowship hall, where volunteers were setting up folding tables and hanging handmade signs. "This town takes care of its own." The fellowship hall hummed with activity. Church ladies arranged plates of cookies and brownies, while deacons set up a donation box decorated with paper hearts. A banner stretched across the back wall read, "Supporting our neighbors. Help Maria and Noah." Charlie tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Dad, look." He pointed to a table where Mrs. Peterson, who ran the local craft store, was selling hand-knitted scarves. "All proceeds go to help Miss Maria," she called out cheerfully. More townspeople filtered in despite the weather. Mr. Douglas, the veteran Ethan had helped on the roadside, arrived with several other VA members. Joe from the construction site brought his whole family. Even Maggie from the diner closed early to attend, carrying trays of her famous apple pie. "Ethan," Pastor Green said quietly, "would you consider sharing a few words at tonight's VA community meeting? Your story might help others who are struggling." Ethan's jaw tightened. Public speaking wasn't his thing, especially about personal matters. But when he glanced at Maria, who was watching Noah help arrange cookies with Mrs. Peterson, something shifted in his chest. "I'll do it," he said simply. Later that evening, the VA Center's meeting room was packed. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Ethan stood at the podium, his hands gripping the edges. The faces before him were familiar men and women who carried their own invisible wounds of war. He started, then cleared his throat. I used to think being strong meant carrying everything alone. His voice grew steadier as he continued. When I lost my wife Sarah in Afghanistan, I shut down, tried to be a stone for my son. But stones don't heal, and they don't grow. The room was silent, except for the soft patter of rain against the windows. In the back row, Maria sat with Charlie and Noah in her lap, listening intently. Someone asked me recently if I was a superhero, Ethan said, managing a small smile as several veterans chuckled. Truth is, I was trying so hard not to be broken that I forgot how to be whole. But this community, this family we've found, showed me that real strength isn't about standing alone. It's about standing together. Young veterans nodded, some wiping their eyes. Dr. Hampton, seated in the front row, gave Ethan an encouraging smile. My wife used to say that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about doing what's right, even when you are afraid. Ethan's voice grew passionate. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is let others help us fight our battles. When he finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. Several younger veterans approached him, sharing their own struggles with PTSD and isolation. Maria waited until the crowd thinned before walking up to him, her eyes shining with tears and pride. That was beautiful, she whispered, squeezing his hand. The rain had settled into a gentle drizzle by the time Ethan and Charlie headed home. Street lamps cast warm circles of light on the wet pavement, and the air smelled clean and fresh. Charlie skipped ahead, splashing in puddles despite Ethan's half-hearted protests. As they approached their front porch, Charlie suddenly stopped. Dad, look! Taped to their front door was a large piece of construction paper. Written in bright crayon letters were the words, "Heroes live here," surrounded by drawings of hearts and stars. Charlie bounced excitedly, recognizing Noah's artistic style. Can we keep it up forever? Charlie asked, beaming at his father. Ethan touched the sign gently, feeling something warm bloom in his chest. For the first time in years, he smiled without that familiar weight of guilt and grief, a real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes and lightened his whole face. Yeah, buddy, he said softly. We can keep it up. The kitchen of Maria's modest home filled with the warm aroma of garlic and tomato sauce. Through the window, golden evening light painted everything in honey-colored hues, catching dust motes that danced above the stovetop where Maria stirred a large pot of sauce. Beside her, Ethan carefully broke strands of spaghetti in half before dropping them into boiling water. You know, Maria said with a gentle smile, breaking the pasta is considered a crime in Italy. Ethan shrugged, a playful glint in his eyes. Good thing we're in Virginia, then. Their comfortable laughter mingled with the sounds of giggling and thumping from the living room, where Charlie and Noah were engaged in an elaborate construction project involving every pillow and blanket they could find. Dad, Charlie called out, we need more pillows for the fort's defense system. Yeah, Mr. Ethan, Noah chimed in. The bad guys might get in. Ethan exchanged an amused look with Maria before heading to check on their architectural endeavors. The living room had been transformed into a maze of cushions and sheets, with a makeshift entrance marked by a crayon sign that read, Heroes Only. Well, Ethan said, crouching down to peer inside the fort, this looks pretty secure to me. What kind of bad guys are we talking about? Dragons, Charlie exclaimed. And robots, Noah added, his eyes wide with excitement. Ah, Ethan nodded seriously. In that case, you might need this. He grabbed a throw pillow from the couch and tossed it into their fortress, causing both boys to erupt in delighted squeals. Back in the kitchen, Maria watched the scene unfold, her heart full. The sauce bubbled gently as she added a pinch of herbs, the recipe one of the few good things she'd inherited from her grandmother. I haven't heard Noah laugh like that in, I can't even remember how long, she said softly when Ethan returned. Charlie either, Ethan admitted, checking the pasta. It's good to see them both so happy. As they worked side by side in the kitchen, their movements fell into an easy rhythm. Ethan reached for plates while Maria drained the pasta, their actions coordinated as if they'd done this 100 times before. The domesticity of it all struck him suddenly. How natural it felt, how right. After dinner, while the boys returned to their fortress, Ethan spotted his old guitar in the corner where he'd left it during his last visit. Maria noticed his gaze and smiled encouragingly. Play something? He hesitated only briefly before picking it up, settling into an armchair near the fort's entrance. His fingers found the strings, and soon soft chords filled the room. It had been years since he'd played regularly, not since Sarah. But now, surrounded by pillow walls and the warm glow of table lamps, the music flowed easily. My mom used to sing to me, Noah said quietly from inside the fort. Maria's eyes met Ethan's over the guitar. I'm not much of a singer anymore, she admitted. Sarah was, Ethan found himself saying. She knew all these old country songs. Used to drive me crazy how she'd wake up singing them. Memory brought a smile instead of the usual ache. Tell us about her, Maria said gently, settling onto the couch. Ethan's fingers continued moving across the strings as he spoke. She was fearless, drove our commanding officers nuts because she'd volunteer for every dangerous mission. Said somebody had to do it, might as well be her. He looked at Charlie, who had poked his head out of the fort to listen. She loved you more than anything, buddy. Used to send you drawings from overseas every week. I remember the drawings, Charlie said. They're in my special box. As the evening deepened into night, Maria opened up too. She spoke about her early days with Ray, how charming he'd been at first. He was so good at making promises, she said, her voice quiet but steady. But then his temper would flare, and those promises would shatter like glass. Noah was just a baby the first time I tried to leave. Ethan's playing softened, providing a gentle backdrop to her words. I want Noah to know what real strength looks like, she continued. Not the kind that breaks things, but the kind that builds them up, the kind that fixes what's broken. Her eyes met Ethan's, and understanding passed between them. The boys had grown quiet in their fort, their superhero adventures giving way to drowsiness. Charlie's soft snores soon joined the guitar's melody. I should probably get him home, Ethan said, carefully setting the guitar aside. Maria nodded, standing to help gather their things. Thank you for coming tonight. It means a lot to us. To both of us. As Ethan gently lifted a sleeping Charlie from the fort, Noah stirred. Can they come again tomorrow? He asked sleepily. We'll see them soon, Maria promised, smoothing her son's hair. At the door, Ethan paused, Charlie's warm weight against his shoulder. This was nice, he said simply, but his eyes conveyed more. Maria touched his arm briefly. It was perfect. The night air was cool and clear as Ethan carried Charlie to the car. Stars dotted the dark Virginia sky, twinkling like distant promises. As he drove home, Charlie still sleeping peacefully in the back seat, Ethan found himself whispering a prayer. Something he hadn't done since Sarah's death. Thank you, he murmured to the quiet night, to whatever force had brought these people into their lives. Then, barely audible even to himself, he added a promise to protect this fragile, beautiful thing growing between their broken families, to be the kind of hero Noah believed him to be. The evening stretched quietly over Brookridge, a gentle breeze rustling through the trees outside Ethan's window. The local news droned on about weather patterns while Charlie's soft snores drifted down the hallway. Ethan sat in his worn leather armchair, his mind wandering to the day's events, how Noah had shown him another superhero drawing at the diner, how Maria's eyes had crinkled when she smiled. His phone buzzed on the side table, Maria's name lighting up the screen. The moment he answered, his world turned upside down. Ethan, help! Maria's voice cracked with terror. The shed, it's on fire! Noah ran inside for his stuffed bear. I can't. Her words dissolved into screams. Ethan's military training kicked in instantly. I'm coming! Call 911! He was already running, grabbing his keys, his heart thundering against his ribs. The 3-minute drive to Maria's house felt like hours. He could see the orange glow from blocks away. Flames reached toward the night sky, turning Maria's backyard into a wall of fire. The old wooden shed where Noah kept his toys was completely engulfed. Maria stood in the yard, hysterical, held back by a neighbor as she tried to run toward the inferno. "Noah!" she screamed. "My baby!" Ethan's mind flashed to another fire, years ago in a distant desert. The heat, the chaos, the lives at stake. But this time was different this time. He could save someone. Without hesitation, he sprinted toward the burning shed. The heat hit him like a physical wall, scorching his lungs with every breath. Through the crackling flames, he heard a small voice crying, "Help! Mommy!" "Noah!" Ethan called out, ducking under a falling beam. "Where are you, buddy?" "Here." The voice came from behind a stack of boxes. Noah huddled in the corner, clutching his teddy bear, tears cutting tracks through the soot on his face. The roof groaned ominously above them. Ethan didn't think, he just moved. He scooped Noah into his arms, shielding the boy's face against his chest. A burning board crashed down, catching Ethan's shoulder. The pain was immediate and searing, but he kept moving. 3 steps to the door, 2 steps, 1, 2 steps. They burst out into the night air just as the shed's roof collapsed with a thunderous crash. Ethan stumbled forward, making sure Noah was safely away from the flames before his legs gave out. He collapsed onto the grass, his shoulder and back screaming in agony. Maria rushed forward, gathering Noah into her arms, sobbing with relief. "Baby, oh my baby." She covered his soot-stained face with kisses while checking him for injuries. In the distance, sirens wailed closer. Red and blue lights began to flash against the houses, casting strange shadows across the gathering crowd of neighbors. Through the haze of pain, Ethan heard shouts and a scuffle. "Let me go! It was just supposed to be a message!" Ray's drunken voice carried across the yard as 2 police officers wrestled him into handcuffs. He reeked of alcohol and gasoline, his face twisted with anger and something that might have been fear. Ethan tried to sit up, but the world tilted sideways. The pain was becoming unbearable, his burned skin feeling like it was still on fire. He felt gentle hands supporting his head. Maria had knelt beside him, tears streaming down her face. "Stay with me," she pleaded, gripping his hand. "Please, Ethan, stay with me." The ambulance arrived in a blur of activity. EMTs swarmed around him, their voices professional and urgent. They lifted him onto a stretcher, and Maria's hand slipped from his. Through his increasingly clouded vision, he could see her tear-streaked face, illuminated by the pulsing red emergency lights. The last thing he heard before the ambulance doors closed was Noah's small voice. "Is my superhero going to be okay, Mommy?" Darkness crept in at the edges of Ethan's vision as the sirens started up again. Maria's face, lit by those harsh red lights, was the last thing he saw before consciousness slipped away. The ambulance sped through the quiet streets of Brookridge, carrying its precious cargo toward help. While behind them, the last embers of the shed fire died in the night air, leaving only ash and the acrid smell of smoke, and the haunting echo of a little boy's question about his superhero. The steady beep of medical monitors filled the sterile hospital room. Sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting thin stripes across Ethan's still form. His chest rose and fell beneath crisp white sheets, his arms wrapped in clean bandages where the fire had left its mark. Maria sat in the worn visitor's chair, her fingers absently turning the pages of an unread magazine. Dark circles shadowed her eyes from nights spent worrying, alternating shifts with Charlie so Ethan would never be alone. She glanced at the growing collection of Get Well cards on the windowsill, their cheerful messages a stark contrast to the room's somber atmosphere. "Miss Bennett?" A nurse poked her head in, clipboard in hand. "Time for his medication check." Maria nodded, moving aside as the nurse went about her routine. She watched the gentle way the nurse adjusted Ethan's IV, checked his vitals, and recorded everything in her charts. The nurse's kind eyes met Maria's worried gaze. "His burns are healing well," she assured Maria. "The doctor says his body just needs time to recover from the shock." Charlie arrived after school, his backpack still slung over. His small face lit up with hope each time he entered the room, only to dim slightly when he saw his father still unconscious. Today he carried a new drawing, carefully protected in a plastic sleeve. "Hi, Miss Maria." he said quietly, climbing onto the chair next to her. "How's Dad today?" "The same, sweetie." Maria squeezed his shoulder. "But the nurses say he's getting stronger." Charlie pulled out his drawing, a careful recreation of the night of the fire, but reimagined with his father wearing a cape, swooping in to save Noah from cartoon flames. He'd drawn himself and Noah standing safely to the side, cheering. "Can I put it with the others?" he asked. Maria helped him tape it to the wall where Ethan could see it when he woke up. The collection of Charlie's artwork had grown over the days, each one featuring Ethan as different kinds of heroes: a firefighter, a soldier, a dad pushing kids on swings. Pastor Green's arrival brought the comfort of familiar footsteps and the scent of coffee from the hospital cafeteria. He handed Maria a cup, knowing she wouldn't leave for a proper break. "The congregation sends their love," he said, settling into one of the chairs. "Mrs. Henderson's making another casserole for you and Noah." "They've all been so kind," Maria whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I never knew a town could come together like this." The pastor smiled, his weathered face gentle. "That's what community means, dear." And Ethan helped build that community, even if he didn't realize it. All those quiet acts of kindness, they add up. They matter. Charlie had moved closer to the bed, his small hand resting near his father's. "Pastor Green, do you think Dad can hear us?" "I believe he can, Charlie. Why don't you tell him about your day?" Charlie brightened at the suggestion. He leaned in close to Ethan's ear, speaking with the earnest confidence of a child. "Dad, I got an A on my math test today, and Noah shared his cookies with me at lunch. We made you a get well card in art class. Maria watched, signed it." Maria watched Charlie's one-sided conversation, her heart aching. The boy's unwavering faith in his father's recovery touched something deep inside her. She thought of Noah, who asked about Ethan every morning and night, who insisted on making a new drawing for Super Ethan each day. The afternoon sun slowly shifted across the room. Pastor Green excused himself for evening services, promising to return tomorrow. Maria helped Charlie with his homework while they kept their vigil, the scratch of pencil on paper mixing with the steady rhythm of medical equipment. As evening approached, Charlie carefully placed his latest superhero drawing on the bedside table. He stood on tiptoe to kiss his father's cheek, then whispered with fierce conviction, "Wake up, Dad. You're my hero." In the quiet that followed, something changed. A single tear traced its way down Ethan's cheek, catching the last rays of sunlight. NTE, the first sign that somewhere in the darkness, he was finding his way back to them. The machines continued their steady rhythm, but now they seemed to carry a note of promise. Maria and Charlie held their breath, watching, hoping, as that solitary tear marked the beginning of Ethan's return. The morning sun painted golden stripes across the sterile hospital room, filtering through the half-closed blinds. The steady beep of monitors filled the quiet space as Ethan's eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. His throat felt dry, and his skin pulled tight where the bandages covered his burns. Maria, who had dozed off in the chair beside his bed, jerked awake at his slight movement. Her eyes widened in disbelief, and she grabbed his hand. "Ethan?" "Oh my God! You're awake!" Her voice cracked with emotion as she quickly pressed the call button for the nurse. "Water," Ethan managed to croak, his voice rough from disuse. Maria's hands trembled as she helped him take small sips from a plastic cup. "Easy now," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You've been out for almost 4 days." The door opened as a nurse rushed in, her face lighting up when she saw Ethan conscious. "Welcome back, Mr. Cole. Let me check your vitals." She moved efficiently around him, checking monitors and making notes on her tablet. "Noah?" Ethan asked, his eyes searching Maria's face with concern. "He's perfectly fine," Maria assured him, squeezing his hand. "Not a scratch on him thanks to you. Charlie's been watching over him while I've been here." She wiped her eyes with her free hand. "Ray's in jail. They arrested him right after the fire. He won't hurt anyone anymore." Ethan closed his eyes briefly, relief washing over his features. The nurse finished her examination and smiled. "Your vital signs are stable, Mr. Cole. The doctor will be in shortly to check your burns, but you're making excellent progress." After the nurse left, Maria pulled her chair closer to the bed. "The whole town's been talking about what you did. They've raised money for your hospital bills. More than enough, actually." She reached for a stack of cards on the bedside table. "Everyone's been sending messages and prayers." "Didn't do anything special," Ethan mumbled, trying to shift position and wincing at the pain. "Just couldn't let him." He trailed off, remembering the terror of seeing the shed ablaze, knowing Noah was inside. "Stop that right now," Maria said firmly, though her eyes were soft. "You ran into a burning building to save my son. You're hurt because you protected us. You saved us." Her voice grew thick with emotion. "You are a superhero, Ethan Cole, whether you want to admit it or not." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Just doing what's right," he whispered. The door opened again, and Charlie burst in, his face lighting up when he saw his father awake. "Dad!" He rushed to the bedside, only slowing when Maria gently reminded him to be careful of the tubes and wires. "Hey, buddy," Ethan said softly, reaching out to ruffle his son's hair with his less bandaged hand. "You been good?" Charlie nodded eagerly. "Noah and I made you get well cards, and his drawings are way better than mine, but I tried really hard." He carefully placed a homemade card on the rolling table near the bed. Noah peeked around the door frame shyly, and Maria beckoned him in. The small boy approached the bed cautiously, his eyes wide as he took in all the medical equipment. "Mr. Ethan?" he said in a small voice. "Thank you for saving me from the fire." Ethan's eyes grew misty. "Any time, buddy. That's what." He glanced at Maria, then back at Noah. "That's what heroes do, right?" Throughout the day, visitors came and went. Dr. Hampton from the VA stopped by, pride evident in her eyes as she told him how his example was inspiring other veterans. Pastor Green brought flowers and led a brief prayer of thanksgiving. Officer Brooks visited to update him on Ray's case, multiple charges, ensuring he'd be away for a long time. As evening approached, the room grew quieter. Charlie had gone home with his aunt, and Noah was staying with Maria's sister. Maria remained, sitting beside Ethan's bed as the sun began to set. She picked up her Bible from her purse and opened it to a marked page. "Would you mind if I read something?" she asked softly. When Ethan shook his head, she began reading in a gentle voice, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good." Ethan's eyes drifted closed as the words washed over him, bringing a peace he hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Sarah's death, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he was meant to be. Maria watched as his breathing evened out into sleep, the last rays of sunlight painting his face in warm gold. The Bible verse seemed to hang in the air between them, a testament to the quiet strength that had brought them all through the darkness and into the light. The fluorescent lights of the hospital's rehabilitation wing buzzed softly overhead as Ethan gripped the parallel bars. Sweat beaded on his forehead, his arms trembling with effort. The burns on his back and shoulders still pulled painfully beneath his hospital gown, but he refused to give up. "That's it, Cole," encouraged Jake, his physical therapist. 3 more steps. Ethan caught sight of his reflection in the window, a shadow of his former self, but growing stronger each day. Around him, other veterans worked through their own exercises, the quiet determination in the room almost tangible. To his right, an older veteran named Marcus struggled with his walker. Frustration etched on his weathered face. Ethan recognized that look. He'd worn it himself plenty of times. "Hey, Marcus," Ethan called out, his voice warm despite his strain. "Remember what they taught us in basic? 1 foot in front of the other." Marcus managed a gruff chuckle. "Easy for you to say, Superman. Some of us weren't born with steel bones." "Steel bones?" Ethan shook his head, smiling. "Nah, just stubborn ones. Besides, I heard the cafeteria's serving that mystery meatloaf today. Better get moving if you want first dibs." A ripple of laughter spread through the room. Even Jake cracked a smile as he steadied Ethan's progress. The door opened, and Dr. Hampton walked in, her familiar presence bringing comfort to the room. She carried her usual notebook, but her eyes held a special warmth as she watched Ethan complete his steps. "Looking good, Ethan," she said, pulling up a chair nearby. Much better than last week. Ethan lowered himself carefully into the chair beside her, wiping his face with a towel. Still feels like I'm moving through mud sometimes. But you're moving, she pointed out. And not just physically. She gestured to Marcus, who was now making steady progress with his walker, encouraged by Ethan's earlier words. They're all fighters, Ethan said quietly. Sometimes they just need reminding. Dr. Hampton nodded, her eyes knowing. Like someone else I know. She paused, studying him. You know, when you first came to see me after Sarah's passing, you could barely look anyone in the eye. Now look at you, leading by example, giving hope to others. Ethan watched as another veteran, a young woman with prosthetic legs, successfully completed her walking exercise. The whole room erupted in applause, and he found himself joining in. I think, he said slowly, I just forgot for a while what it means to really live, you know? Not just survive. You found your mission again, Dr. Hampton observed. Ethan thought about Charlie's proud face when he visited, about Noah's crayon drawings covering his hospital room walls, about Maria's gentle strength as she helped him through the worst days of recovery. I think I just remembered what love looks like, he replied softly. Dr. Hampton's eyes misted slightly. Sarah would be proud, Ethan. So proud. For the first time in years, hearing Sarah's name didn't bring that crushing weight of guilt. Instead, he felt a gentle warmth, like a blessing. The afternoon light streamed through the windows as Ethan completed his therapy session. Jake helped him with his final stretches, noting his improved range of motion. The burns are healing well, Jake commented. Another week, and you'll be ready for discharge. The door burst open, and familiar voices filled the room. Charlie and Noah raced in, carefully carrying a covered dish between them, with Maria following close behind. Dad, Charlie called out, we made you pie! Careful, boys, Maria cautioned, but her eyes sparkled with joy. We thought we'd celebrate your last week here. The aroma of fresh-baked apple pie filled the air as they made their way to the hospital courtyard. Cherry blossoms drifted on the spring breeze, creating a pink snowfall around them. Noah helped spread out a checkered blanket, while Charlie proudly cut the pie, slightly crooked. Slices that made everyone smile. Did you see Dad walking today? Charlie asked Maria eagerly. Jake says he's getting super strong again. Like a real superhero, Noah added, his face serious. Ethan caught Maria's eye over the boys' heads, and they shared a quiet look of understanding. The love in her gaze made his heart skip a beat. The courtyard filled with their laughter as they shared the pie, cherry blossoms continuing their gentle dance around them. Other patients and their families joined them, drawn by the warmth and joy of the moment. Marcus wheeled himself over, accepting a slice of pie with a grin. You've got quite a fan club here, Cole. Just lucky, Ethan replied, watching Charlie and Noah demonstrate their superhero poses for an amused audience. We're the lucky ones, Maria said softly, her hand finding his. You taught us all what courage really looks like. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Ethan's front yard as his truck pulled into the driveway. Charlie bounced excitedly in the passenger seat, his small hands pressed against the window. The porch that had been worn and creaking just weeks ago now stood fresh and solid, its new wood gleaming with a coat of white paint. Dad, look! They fixed everything! Charlie's eyes sparkled with wonder. Ethan sat for a moment, taking in the sight. The railing had been replaced, the steps reinforced, and even the old screen door hung straight on its hinges. A welcome home banner fluttered in the gentle breeze, and colorful balloons tied to the posts danced in the wind. As they stepped out of the truck, the front door burst open. Noah ran out first, carefully holding a handmade sign that read, Our Hero, in wobbly crayon letters. Maria followed behind him, her smile warm and genuine as she carried a covered dish that filled the air with the smell of home-cooked comfort. Welcome home, Noah called out, running down the steps to give Charlie a high five. The two boys immediately fell into excited chatter, showing each other their latest superhero drawings. Maria approached Ethan, her eyes soft with concern. How are you feeling? Is it too much? We can come back later if you need to rest. Ethan shook his head, his throat tight with emotion. No, this is This is perfect. He glanced around at his transformed porch. I can't believe everyone did this. The whole neighborhood pitched in, Maria explained, shifting the dish to her hip. Mr. Johnson from the hardware store donated the lumber. The veterans from your support group did most of the work. Even Pastor Green came by with his toolbox. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and something delicious baking in the oven. The living room had been tidied, and vases of fresh flowers sat on every surface. Cards and well-wishes were arranged on the coffee table, their bright envelopes adding splashes of color to the room. We wanted to make it special, Maria said softly, setting her dish on the kitchen counter. The boys helped clean, though I think they spent more time playing than actually cleaning. Charlie and Noah had already disappeared into Charlie's room, their laughter echoing through the house. The sound made Ethan's heart feel lighter than it had in years. I don't know how to thank everyone, Ethan admitted, carefully lowering himself into a kitchen chair. His burns were healing well, but movement still required careful consideration. Maria began setting the table, her movements natural and comfortable in his kitchen. You don't have to thank anyone. This community loves you, Ethan. You've done so much for so many people. Let us take care of you for once. The boys thundered back into the kitchen, carrying what appeared to be hastily constructed superhero costumes made from bed sheets and construction paper. Dad! Noah and I wrote a superhero oath, Charlie announced proudly, adjusting his makeshift cape. Oh yeah? Ethan leaned forward, ignoring the twinge in his side. Let's hear it. The boys stood at attention, paper masks slightly askew, and began reciting in unison. We promise to protect everyone we love, to be brave like superheroes up above, to help people when they're feeling sad, and be strong like Charlie's dad, Noah added with enthusiasm. And Maria, too. She's like Wonder Woman. Maria blushed, laughing as she pulled a golden casserole from the oven. Wonder Woman, huh? I like the sound of that. Something broke loose in Ethan's chest then. A knot of tension he'd carried for so long he'd forgotten it was there. The laugh started small, building from deep in his belly until it filled the whole kitchen. It was real and free and healing, the kind of laugh he hadn't experienced since Sarah was alive. Charlie stared at his father in amazement before joining in, his giggles mixing with Noah's. Maria's eyes glistened as she watched them, her own laughter adding to the joyful chorus. They gathered around the table, the boys still wearing their superhero gear. Maria had made Sarah's old lasagna recipe, the one Ethan had mentioned once in passing at the diner. The gesture touched him deeply. I hope it's okay, Maria said quietly as she served the portions. Charlie told me it was your favorite. It's perfect, Ethan assured her, watching as the boys dug in enthusiastically. The conversation flowed easily, filled with stories and plans for the future. Noah talked about his upcoming school play, while Charlie shared his ideas for their next superhero adventure. After dinner, as Maria packed away leftovers and the boys worked on new superhero drawings at the kitchen table, Ethan stepped out onto his newly rebuilt porch. The night air was cool and clear, stars twinkling overhead in a vast tapestry of light. He gripped the smooth new railing, feeling its strength beneath his hands. The sound of laughter drifted through the screen door behind him, wrapping around him like a warm blanket. Looking up at the brightest star in the sky, Ethan whispered, "Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for showing me the way here." The breeze rustled the trees, carrying with it the scent of spring and new beginnings. In that moment, standing on his porch under the infinite sky, Ethan Cole felt truly at peace for the first time in years. The autumn breeze rustled through the changing leaves as Ethan walked up the familiar steps of the VA Center. His boots echoed against the worn linoleum floors, but this time his footsteps carried purpose rather than just habit. Under his arm, he clutched a weathered notebook filled with detailed sketches and plans, dreams put to paper during his long hospital recovery. Doctor Hampton's office door stood open, warm light spilling into the hallway. She looked up from her desk, her face brightening at the sight of him. "Ethan, come in, come in." He settled into the chair across from her, his movement still careful from healing burns. The notebook lay heavy in his lap as he gathered his thoughts. "I've been thinking," he started, his voice quiet but steady. "About what you said about healing coming from helping others." Dr. Hampton leaned forward, her reading glasses perched on her nose. "Go on." Ethan opened the notebook, revealing carefully drawn blueprints and lists. "There are so many veterans here struggling to find purpose. And there are folks in town who need help with home repairs, but can't afford it." His fingers traced the sketches. "I thought maybe we could bring these two needs together." As he explained his vision for Homes for Heroes, Dr. Hampton's smile grew wider. The project would train veterans in construction and repair work, giving them valuable skills while helping the community. It was more than just fixing houses, it was about rebuilding lives. "This is exactly what I meant about turning pain into purpose, Doctor," Hampton said, studying the plans. "Have you thought about funding?" Ethan nodded, flipping to another page. "I've already talked to Pastor Green. The church is willing to donate their old workshop space. And after the fire." He paused, touching his healing arm unconsciously. "Well, the town's been asking how they can help. This gives them a way." Word spread quickly through Brookridge's tight-knit community. The hardware store offered discounted supplies. Local contractors volunteered to help train the veterans. Even the high school shop class pitched in, building storage shelves for the workshop. One crisp morning, Ethan stood in the empty workshop space, surveying the work ahead. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, illuminating old workbenches and forgotten tools. The sound of footsteps made him turn. Maria stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Noah peeked around her legs, clutching his ever-present superhero drawings. "Thought you could use this," she said, offering him a steaming cup. "Charlie told me you've been here since sunrise." Ethan accepted the coffee gratefully, their fingers brushing. "There's so much to do before we can open." Noah darted forward, holding up his latest artwork. "I drew this for your workshop, mister." "Ethan!" The crayon drawing showed stick figures and capes fixing houses. "Perfect." Ethan smiled, ruffling the boy's hair. "That's going right on the wall, our first decoration." Maria watched them, her eyes soft. "You're really doing this, aren't you?" "Someone once asked me if I was a superhero," Ethan said, glancing at Noah. "Maybe this is how I can be one by helping others find their strength again." Over the next few weeks, the workshop transformed. Veterans from all eras came to help young men fresh from service, Vietnam veterans with decades of experience, women who'd served as military engineers. Each brought their own skills and stories. Ethan moved among them, teaching what he knew, learning what they could share. The sound of saws and hammers filled the air, punctuated by laughter and conversation. It was a different kind of therapy, healing through purpose and community. Maria became a constant presence, bringing coffee and sandwiches, offering encouraging words to frustrated learners. She had a way of making everyone feel welcome, her quiet strength touching hearts as surely as Ethan's leadership. One evening, as the sun painted the workshop windows orange, Ethan worked alone, finishing the day's paperwork. The sound of the door opening made him look up. Maria stood there, holding her usual coffee tray. "You're here late," she said softly, setting a cup beside him. "Just wrapping up," he replied, pushing back from the desk. "First project starts tomorrow, Mrs. Peterson's roof repair." Maria perched on the edge of the desk, her eyes taking in the workshop. Tools hung neatly on pegboards, workbenches gleamed with fresh varnish, and Noah's drawing held pride of place on the wall. "You've created something beautiful here," she said. "Something that matters." Ethan stood, moving to stand beside her. "I couldn't have done it without you." He turned to face her, his voice gentle. "You know that, right? Your strength, your kindness, it's been the foundation of all this." Maria's eyes met his, filled with understanding and something deeper. The workshop grew quiet, save for the distant hum of crickets starting their evening song. The space between them seemed to shrink, charged with unspoken words and tender possibility. Slowly, carefully, Ethan leaned forward. Maria tilted her face up to meet him, and their lips met in a soft, sweet kiss. It was gentle as a whisper, warm as summer rain, a moment of pure trust and hope. When they parted, Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his heart full of quiet joy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but for now, this moment was enough two healing hearts finding home in each other's strength. Standing together in the workshop's golden evening light, they shared a smile that held all the promise of new beginnings. The autumn morning sparkled with possibility as crowds gathered outside the newly renovated warehouse on Pine Street. A hand-painted sign hung proudly above the entrance. Homes for Heroes. Veterans helping veterans. Red, white, and blue bunting decorated the facade, swaying gently in the breeze. Mayor Thompson stood at the podium, her silver hair catching the sunlight. The crowd hushed as she adjusted the microphone. Today, she began, her voice warm and clear, we celebrate more than just the opening of a workshop. We celebrate the spirit of Brookridge itself, a spirit embodied by one man who reminded us what true courage looks like. Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his chair on the makeshift stage, his burn still healing but fading. He wore his best flannel shirt, pressed clean for the occasion. Next to him, Maria squeezed his hand gently, her touch anchoring him as the mayor continued. When Ethan Cole saved young Noah from that fire, he showed us that heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear work boots and carry tool belts. Sometimes they're the quiet ones who fix our porches, help stranded drivers, and teach our children about courage through their actions rather than words. The crowd nodded in agreement. In the front row, several veterans from the VA Center sat tall, wearing matching Homes for Heroes t-shirts. Dr. Hampton beamed from her seat, pride evident in her eyes. But what makes this project truly special, Mayor Thompson continued, is how it transforms pain into purpose. These veterans will help rebuild homes for those in need, proving that sometimes our deepest wounds become our greatest gifts to others. The applause thundered through the morning air. Ethan noticed Mr. Douglas, the elderly veteran he'd helped on the roadside months ago, wiping tears from his eyes. As the mayor stepped back, Charlie and Noah burst from their seats, racing toward the stage. Their sneakers pounded against the wooden steps as they clutched something between them, a large, cardboard creation, covered in glitter and crayon drawings. "Wait! Wait!" Charlie called out, his voice carrying across the crowd, which responded with gentle laughter. Noah, no longer the shy boy from the diner, matched Charlie's enthusiasm. Together they stood before Ethan, holding up their masterpiece, a handmade badge decorated with careful children's artwork. Stars and hearts surrounded the words, "To our superhero," written in wobbly letters. "We made this for you," Noah announced proudly, his voice stronger than Ethan had ever heard it. Charlie nodded vigorously. "Because you're the best superhero ever, Dad." The crowd fell silent, watching this intimate moment unfold. Ethan knelt down to their level, ignoring the slight pull of his healing skin. The boys worked together to pin the badge to his shirt, their small fingers careful and determined. Tears welled in Ethan's eyes as he looked at their creation. This simple cardboard badge meant more than any military medal he'd ever received. He glanced up at Maria, who stood watching with her hands clasped over her heart, her own eyes glistening. In that moment, everything clicked into place. All those years of carrying guilt, of thinking he'd failed Sarah, of believing he didn't deserve happiness, they fell away like autumn leaves. Being a hero wasn't about dramatic rescues or running into burning buildings. It was about showing up every day with an open heart, ready to love despite the risk of loss. It was about making pancakes for breakfast, fixing broken steps, and teaching little boys how to tie their shoes. The crowd's applause started soft, then swelled until it filled the street. Veterans stood at attention, offering silent salutes. Pastor Green raised his hands in blessing. Officer Brooks whistled through his fingers, and someone started chanting, "Speech! Speech!" Ethan shook his head, but Charlie tugged his sleeve. "Just say thank you, Dad. That's what superheroes do." Standing slowly, Ethan approached the microphone. He cleared his throat, looking out at the faces of his community, no longer strangers, but family. "I'm no hero," he said quietly. "I'm just a man who learned that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is let others in. Thank you for being my teachers in that lesson." Maria stepped forward, wrapping her arm around his waist. Charlie and Noah flanked them on either side, creating a perfect picture of healing and hope. "All right, everyone," called the photographer from the local paper. "Let's get a group shot." The crowd shuffled forward eagerly. Veterans lined up in their matching shirts. Families gathered close, and children squeezed into the front row. Charlie and Noah insisted on sitting right at Ethan's feet, their cardboard badge gleaming in the morning light. "Say heroes!" the photographer called out. The response was thunderous. "Heroes!" The camera clicked, capturing that perfect moment. Dozens of smiling faces, the new workshop standing proud behind them, and at the center, a family born from courage and kindness. It was more than just a photograph. It was a portrait of redemption, a testament to the healing power of community and love. As the crowd began to disperse toward the reception tables laden with coffee and Mrs. Green's famous apple pies, Ethan stood rooted to his spot, taking in the scene. The badge on his chest might have been made of cardboard and glitter, but it felt like pure gold. The morning sun painted golden stripes across the worn linoleum floor of Maggie's diner. The familiar smell of coffee and fresh-baked bread wrapped around the small family like a warm blanket. Ethan Cole sat in what had become their regular booth, watching Charlie and Noah huddle over a shared comic book, their heads bent together in concentration. Maria caught his eye from across the table, her smile soft and knowing. She looked different now, lighter somehow, as if the weight of fear had finally lifted from her shoulders. The past few months had changed them. All. "Batman would totally win," Charlie declared, pointing at a colorful panel. "No way," Noah protested, though his eyes sparkled with fun. "Superman has actual powers," Ethan chuckled, stirring his coffee. The sound of their debate mixed with the comfortable clatter of plates and the murmur of Sunday morning conversations. Through the window, he could see folks heading to church, their faces bright in the autumn sunshine. Old Mr. Douglas waved as he passed by, and Ethan raised his coffee cup in greeting. The elderly veteran had become one of their first renovation projects at Homes for Heroes. The memory of the volunteers, fellow veterans finding purpose in helping others, brought warmth to Ethan's chest. "More coffee, hero?" Maggie herself appeared beside their table, coffee pot in hand, her weathered face crinkled with affection. "Just Ethan is fine, Maggie," he replied, but held out his cup anyway. The nickname had stuck around town, no matter how much he protested. "Daddy saved 3 houses this week," Charlie announced proudly, looking up from the comic book. "And he taught Mr. Jenkins how to fix his own roof." Maria reached across the table and squeezed Ethan's hand. "The workshop's been such a blessing for everyone," she said softly. The morning light caught the simple ring on her finger, a promise of tomorrows that they'd made just last week. Ethan felt his cheeks warm, still unused to praise. "The men do all the real work," he said. "I just show them where to start." "That's what makes you special," Maria replied. "You show people how to believe in themselves again." The boys had returned to their friendly argument about superheroes, their half-eaten pancakes forgotten. Noah's drawings covered the walls of the workshop now, bright capes and masks watching over the veterans as they learned to rebuild more than just houses. Looking around the diner, Ethan noticed how different everything felt from that first morning when a little boy's innocent question had cracked open his carefully guarded heart. The same regulars sat at the counter, the same coffee percolated, but the world had shifted somehow. He remembered the dark days in the hospital, the fear that gripped him when he thought he might leave Charlie alone. But even then, surrounded by machines and uncertainty, he'd felt something new growing. A community, a family, a future worth fighting for. "Time to head out, troops," Ethan announced, checking his watch. They had promised to help Pastor Green set up for the afternoon service. Charlie and Noah scrambled to gather their things, their superhero debate temporarily forgotten. Maria stood, smoothing her dress, and Ethan couldn't help but marvel at how naturally they had all fallen into step together. The boy's eyes were serious, filled with that same innocent wisdom that had started everything. "Sir," he asked, his voice clear in the Sunday morning quiet, "are you a superhero?" The question hung in the air, heavy with memory. Ethan knelt down, meeting Noah's gaze. He thought about Sarah, about loss and healing, about second chances disguised as small boys with big questions. He thought about Maria's courage and Charlie's unwavering faith in him. "Nobody," he said softly, resting a gentle hand on Noah's shoulder. "I just finally met one who reminded me how to be one." The truth of it settled in his chest like a prayer answered. Beside them, Maria wiped at her eyes, and Charlie's face glowed with pride and understanding beyond his years. The bell above the door chimed its familiar welcome as Ethan reached for the handle. Sunlight poured through the glass, warming them all in its embrace. Outside, the American flag rippled in the breeze, its colors bright against the clear blue sky. Maria slipped her hand into his as they stepped into the morning light, their children chattering ahead of them. The sidewalk was dotted with fallen leaves, red and gold against the concrete, nature's own celebration of change and renewal. In that moment, holding the door for his family, Ethan understood that sometimes the greatest acts of heroism weren't about rushing into burning buildings or facing down danger. Sometimes they were about opening your heart again, about choosing love over fear, about helping others find their way back to hope. And in that quiet understanding, in the gentle weight of Noah's question, and the answering warmth of Maria's hand in his, Ethan Cole, no longer just the quiet veteran, but a man reborn through kindness, faith, and love, found his own kind of peace. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Ethan Cole, I hand-picked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.